Christian Angermayer, founder of Apeiron Investment Group, founder and chairman of Atai Life Sciences. Welcome back to Psychedelic Vantage. How are you doing
Thank
today?
you for having me, Jake. Always a pleasure. Lots is happening.
Definitely a lot happening, and especially for the psychedelic medicine space in 2025, and of course, Atai with some really important readouts this year and early next year as well. Four phase two readouts within the next 12 months. Very exciting times. So, your family office, Apeiron Investment Group, recently invested $22.75 million into Atai. So I guess my question to you is, why now?
Well, you already said it. So maybe there's always two questions, like what's the micro analysis in this case of a tie? And then we can also touch base on what's sort of the macro picture for the entire biotech market, because they're obviously very interlinked. But if we stay with a tie first, so what's happening with a tie? We're going to have four major phase two readouts over the next 12 months. So till the end of Q1. And every single one should have, given that it's positive, what I'm expecting, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have, I don't know it, but like I have a huge confidence, should be a very, very sort of positive catalyst for the stock. And we have four of them. So I think it's sort of the right time from a high perspective. And then the second analysis, though, is also, and we touched a little bit on that before we started recording, is like if you look at the biotech industry as a whole and the XPI and then the stock market listed biotech world, it's carnage. It's the worst time since most like last 20 years, or actually the worst time for sure. And mentioning it because like it's actually even a little bit hidden or like concealed, because like the XPI, the biotech index, which used to and is still called and seen as the small cap index or small mid cap index, they rebalanced like in 2022 and took in some large caps, which are now the biggest positions like Amgen, Gilead, whatever. So if you go back to what the XPI was before, to the original composition, small and mid caps, then it would not be at 90 or whatever. We are now 88 or whatever. We would be at 45-ish. So which coming from 170, which shows the whole sort of carnage done. Yeah, but again, I'm not saying that to scare people. Like I'm saying that like I think it's really like a once in a every few decades excessive, how you say, not exuberation, but the opposite. What's the opposite? Like excessive like depression of biotech stocks. So it's actually not even the pitch just for a time. I mean, that's obviously my company. I'm super biased. I believe we have a lot of micro events, but I would say everybody, look, I believe biotech as a whole will recover and then massively recover, because I could name you 20, 30, 40 biotech stocks who are trading as low as Atai do, unfortunately, and like, yeah, who are high quality, late stage companies. So long story short, though, what is the decisive factor for biotech, or at least one of the decisive factors for biotech valuations, are interest rates. And I deeply believe interest rates gonna come down further. Started just a bit, but like we're gonna see, especially in the second half of the year, and that should be, in my personal point of view, sort of the bottom or turning point for biotech stock as a whole. So what we have, coming to your question, we have Atai with these four readouts coming up, which should be good anyway. But if that's sort of hopefully meets a recovery in biotech stocks, then we hopefully have the perfect positive story.
Yeah, I hope to see that, and I'm really looking forward to the four phase two readouts. And I guess when I'm thinking about a biotech bear market, it's especially brutal when companies don't have when there's like a catalyst desert, and that's certainly not the case with the Atai. It's a busy year, busy next 12 months for catalysts, and I'm really excited to see the data from these four different compounds in different indications. I was reading through your recent piece on Substack, laying out basically the bull thesis for Atai Life Sciences, and a couple of points stood out to me. The first one, so of course, with these short duration psychedelic compounds with the 2 hour-ish treatment window, you look at that, and then you look at Spravato, also 2 hour treatment window, but it requires many visits to the clinics. There's some shortcomings. It definitely helps a lot of people, but I mean, listen, Spravato is now officially a blockbuster drug, right? And also, you wrote about in your Substack piece, only 55,000 patients were treated in 2024. Um, and, I've heard that Spravato could end up even hitting peak sales of $5 billion. So, and
Yeah,
also,
but
there's it also got approved as a monotherapy recently, you might have seen. So that's going to expand it even more. People don't have to take a new antidepressant before going on it. So the growth is there. And I want to ask you, I mean, do you see this as a read through for short duration psychedelic compounds?
yeah, 100%. I would say I see it actually as the Spravato success now. Finally, I see as a read through for any psychedelic compounds, especially the short acting ones. So if we go back, what do I believe? Like, by the way, I'm saying that very constantly since we started atai. So the one is the market for, let's start there. The market for psychedelics will be much, much bigger than any analyst is at the moment, or any investor is predicting. Why? Because in all the studies, and there is a very banal reason for it, but most of the studies are done with treatment-resistant depression. Yeah. Why do you do treatment-resistant depression? Because it's kind of simplified said, the easiest route, meaning these people have tried everything, have no other chance, and they're also really, really bad, which means, hopefully, which we already have proven with Compass and others, if your drug works, then the improvement is significant, and that's what you want to show.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's why most of the studies out there, or a lot of them, are for treatment-resistant depression, and that's how people model it, because treatment-resistant depression means you try all the other stuff first, yeah, and then you try psychedelics. So for many reasons, I think that's not how once approved psychedelics will be treated, sort of say in the wild, or in the medical thing, because the other drugs which people are normally trying first have a lot of side effects. Yeah, and so far in the studies, yeah, psychedelics as a whole, as a group, have not severe side effects. So people, in my point of view, will come to the therapist once psychedelics are approved and will say, wait a moment, why should I try all the shitty stuff? Why don't we start with psychedelics? Yeah. So I think there will be a huge sort of pressure from patients on their therapist and say, look, this is what I want to start with, not that's what I want to try last. Yeah. Also, by the way, because different than, for example, 5 years ago, and that's important that it changed, because coming to Spravato in a second, the zeitgeist or the view on these therapeutics has changed. Like, sort of, you have the How to Change Your Mind on Netflix, and like in general, like I think everybody who's watching can attest to that psychedelics kind of have arrived in mainstream already. Actually, we are sort of need to hurry up, because like in this case, the mainstream already kind of accepted psychedelics as a potential treatment for mental health before the drugs are actually on the market. So there will be these bottom-up sort of already knowledge and sort of expectations. Second, also, which is maybe the most important point, I have maybe, I would say, like 50, 70 people seen, who I personally know, who did psychedelics for medical reasons. And all of them were at least helped. Some really cured, some at least got significant better. But what the interesting thing is that all of them, in their own way, became a kind of activist or promoter, in terms of you. And by the way, we never spoke about your experience. I don't know if you want to speak to, but like there is most likely a reason why you're doing that. Yeah, why are you having a Zoom call with me? Yeah, so how did you come to it? So practically every single person I know whose life has been touched by psychedelics wants, actually, in one way or the other, give that positive experience and sort of knowledge on. Some just to their friends in a small group. Some might start a Twitter account, like some might start a psychedelic company, but like truly that is, I think it's a wildly underestimated thing. I've never met anybody whose life was sort of positively touched by psychedelics and who said, "Oh, I want to keep that for myself, that knowledge or whatever." No, everybody wants to tell it, at least, again, friends, family, or maybe go on TV. But that, if you take it, by the way, have you ever heard of somebody who says, "Oh, Xanax is so amazing, you should do it"? No, because it's shit. Yeah. So meaning once this is available and people get helped by it, they gonna start talk about it, because that is practically, for me, it's inherent to psychedelics, is that you want to talk about it after to your friends and family or broader circle. So they're gonna become a grassroots kind of push, which we don't have with any other drug. I would know, like, you're not going, "Oh my God, like, yeah, I just did this therapy and like and it was good." No, normally people are like, "Ah, like it was, but it helped me." Like, but in this case, people are really becoming evangelists, is the right word. Yeah, and that together again with the side effects of the others, whatever, I believe there will be these massive sort of push that people really will tell their therapists, "No, I want to start with them." So and that, by the way, wildly, if you take that, would blow all the numbers positively up, like, because all the analysts are just like, "Oh, 1%, 2%, 3% of all people who have depression, whatever, will use psychedelics." No, I think it's going to be 50 plus. Like, again, so now the question was always, why didn't that happen to Spravato? That
Yeah.
was sort of the counter argument of the naysayers, like, because since I think it's 2000 when Spravato is on the market, yeah, maybe
2019, I
2019.
think, right?
Pardon?
FDA approval for Spravato, I think, was 2019.
Oh,
Correct.
or 19, yeah. So, and at the beginning, Spravato was super slow.
Yes.
So what's the difference? I think the difference is it was a different time. Yeah, it's incredible how much the world has changed in now 6 years. Yeah, everything I just said, again, that there is how to change your mind on Netflix, that people talk about it, was not the case, yeah, in 2019. So the public view on psychedelics massively changed. Second, just as a side note, I always say ketamine is kind of a half psychedelic.
Hmm.
It's psychedelic-like, yeah, but different. You have to do it more often, but still, I think it's positive. But again, it's not. I think it doesn't have the full magnitude of, for example, mushrooms. Then the third is, I also think, and that's, by the way, come to the say why I believe atai should always be independent. We want to do it ourselves. J&J, and I know a lot of people there didn't really know what to do with it because it's so different, because it's kind of a psychedelic. So the sales force of J&J, who at the beginning was, who normally does cancer drugs and whatever, they didn't know how to handle it. It's a super important underlooked point, is that really at the beginning, I talked to all the levels, like people were like, "Ah, we don't even know," like, well, so that changed, but it took much more time than they thought because it was such an outlier to the rest of the portfolio. So that altogether, that it was a different time, the sort of, let's say, society was not fully as where we are now. Yeah, plus that it's not a full psychedelic, plus that J&J as a company, I think, was not really doing a great job because they didn't know how to handle it. That altogether gave Spravato that slow start. But which a lot of people use to say, "Oh, that's the same slow start you're going to have for your drugs." And that's, again, my personal opinion, completely wrong, because I'm like, no, times have changed. Yeah, our drugs are even better than Spravato, and we know what to do. So that's one of the reasons why I always say I really want to bring these drugs to market myself. Yeah, we might partner with pharma companies, and we have very interesting discussions, but I don't want to sell out atai. Yeah, and not just because I'm proud and I think it's a huge opportunity, but also because I think if practically if we becoming a psychedelic pharma company, we just know so much better how to treat these substances, what's the right sort of marketing and rollout strategy whatsoever, as in comparison if they ended up in just a huge portfolio of a big pharma company. Yeah, but most importantly, times have changed, and you have these sort of viral character in the meantime that people demanded. And by the way, now again with a little bit of delay, do you see that in the numbers of Spravato? Yeah, but as I said, they still just treating 55,000 people, because I still think we're in the very early days. And what I just said, that people are going to talk about it and that people are going to use it more often, that will happen the next 2-3 years. So I do believe Spravato going to be a 5 billion plus revenue drug. Um, by the way, that means the value of it is, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 billion.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think all of our therapeutics in development have the same potential as Spravato, which I always said it at IPO, and it sounds a little bit laughable now, but it's not. Like when we IPO'd at $15 per share, we're a $2 billion company. I always said, if I look at the portfolio, I think we can be a 20 billion plus company. And I still think that. Now we
Mhm.
come from 200, 300 million. Yeah, but I still think the upside is exactly the same. We just go through this sort of distorted market reality.
Yeah, I definitely hear you, Christian. And I guess maybe some other things here about Spravato. I guess COVID, I think, also affected that rollout. And I think I heard in a podcast that when Spravato rolled out, there was only 100 or 200 clinics that were capable of delivering this treatment. And now there's, I think, over 4,000 clinics in the US. So the
And
clinical
growing. That's exactly,
infrastructure,
yeah. So that's
yeah.
the other point you could say. Like I think the quote is what's it, the famous saying is the pioneers take the arrows, the settler take the land. Like that's coming to your point with the 2 hour window. Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, like there were so many. So indeed, the doctors and the therapists were not fully ready is the wrong word, but like again, they needed to be educated. Let's say it
Yeah.
neutrally. Yeah, I do think J&J could have made a better job with educating them, but additionally, they needed to be educated. Now we're in a world where, again, society is much more ready, but also the therapists are much more ready to say, like, they all use Spravato now, thousands of clinics, and we fitting exactly into that 2 hour window with two of our therapeutics, with DMT and with 5-MeO DMT. But also, like, again, if you're a therapist who does Spravato, you can also do compass psilocybin for 4 to 6 hours. It still fits, but like the perfect fit is indeed DMT and 5-MeO DMT.
So this, I think this was maybe my favorite part of your Substack piece, and one I really am looking forward to hearing you elaborate further on here. You stated that you believe psychedelics, and you said this already, will not be last resort treatments, but treatments with a very broad use case, potentially following the Ozempic playbook. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, for sure. Like my favorite topic. Like it's like so. A is what I said with in general. Like while people model it as last resort treatment, I think for the let's call it acknowledged or usual mental health issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, and so on. I think psychedelics will be the first choice. By the way, that alone, I can't emphasize it enough. Will make any price target of any analyst tenfold again, because they're all just calculating with such a tiny, tiny market size.
Mhm.
But even then, let's say the sky is not the limit. Like so, but that already would be huge. Like if psychedelics are used as a first sort of in-line treatment and not last in line, changes the whole economics. But beyond that, I think there will be, and I need to be careful because like there's this whole regulation and whatever rules and around like this called off-label use, what Ozempic is, yeah. But you can also catch up with that with post-marketing studies, whatever. But I think, let's say neutrally, I think medicine or the use of psychedelics will evolve, and people will realize that two things. The one, that's one of my favorite points because it's all about, and that was also the reason why I was late for our thing because I was helping the child of a friend with that. Yeah, is being human is fucking complicated. Yeah, and we all go through problematic times, and we kind of do know what the triggers are for why do people develop depression and anxiety, anything like in the mental health world. Yeah, but still, instead of saying, hey, very early when you go through a hard time and you are more at risk to develop a mental health issue, like going through a hard time in your job, going through a hard time in your relationship, having health issues, whatever, we're still not there, and we should be there as society, that people seek help early, practically preventatively, and go to their therapist and say, hey, you know what? I'm not depressive yet, but I feel it's a really challenging time.
Mhm.
Can't we like work on it already now? By the way, much, much easier to keep you healthy. And by the way, that's not just for psychedelics. That's, by the way, also the great thing what the new administration, I think, will emphasize much more. yeah, is like preventative stuff is often so much easier than to wait till something bad happens and then try to turn it around. But that alone, if you think about it, because it is part of the human condition that we go through hard times in our life. And if you see psychedelics as kind of a preventative potential, as I do, for to use it when you have a hard time in order to not get depressive or whatever, then practically, because unfortunately having a hard time is part, what I said, of the human sort of condition, yeah, then you have 100% of the population as practically at a total, as the same in tech, like total addressable market, because we all gonna need it once in a while. Yeah. And by the way, it's already a little bit starting of CEOs who are very under stress who say, hey, I do like once a quarter, I do a ketamine therapy, not because I'm depressive, but it helps me being a better CEO. It helps me being a better father, whatever. Yeah. So I'm actually doing ketamine therapy once in a while, just because my life is very stressful and I'm acknowledging that. And I don't want to wait till whatever something is too bad. Like, I think it's a great, it's similar to Ozempic. Like Ozempic on paper, by the way, is still just approved for diabetes and for obesity, but I'm taking Ozempic. Yeah, I'm not taking Ozempic, I was jokingly saying, because I'm clinically obese. Hopefully, people would agree that I'm not. But I have such a busy life, and I realize, yeah, by the way, could I be more disciplined, eat healthier without Ozempic? Surely I could. It's not a miracle, but like my view on discipline is like I have 100% of it. Like, and it's just emptied every day by my job at the moment. It's very like because of biotech so bad, whatever. It's very hard time. So I just feel that I don't have any more discipline to put on my food because I use it elsewhere. Hey, here comes Ozempic, and it helps me, a thin person, to practically weight management. I always call it outsourced discipline. And in a similar idea, I think, and by the way, I don't know, I saw a number, I forgot it, but like it's high double digit of all the revenues of Ozempic who are used for that actually, for people who are thin, trained, but who just want to be more thin and trained and more slim and like just so use it for that, yeah, off label. And I think the same will happen again, long story short, with psychedelics, where people will realize, hey, why wait? Like it adds so much to my life. So that is the one thing. And if I don't know how much time we have, but the other thing is I do think we're gonna realize that beyond what we see now and what all the studies are done as sort of treatable mental health issues, that actually, especially where the world is going, we're gonna have much more use cases for psychedelic. And just give you one, like, and I think I wanted to check it before the Zoom call. I think it is actually, I can Google it in parallel. It is already, but it's much narrower use. There is a mental health condition which is called adjustment disorder.
Yes.
Yeah. So just Googling it, it is actually positively, it is so let's call it an accepted disease. It's excessive reactions to stress that involve negative thoughts, strong emotions, and changes in behavior. So what are we going to see, like broader picture, the next 20 years? Like the world is changing more than any human being ever had to witness in such a short time, by the way. And I can tell you, if I look at history, one thing we humans are really bad is actually change. Yeah. And the world is just changing. And by the way, it's just starting. Like the next 20 years, and as you know, we're not just doing biotech in my family office at Apeiron, we're doing biotech and tech. Yeah, we're investing a lot in AI, robotics, and stuff like that. The world is going to be crazy. I think it's going to be great, factually. However, I very much acknowledge that the amount of change has never been seen before. And in general, change is bad for mental health, and especially in that amount. So humans will have to go, there's no way around it, through, in a very short period of time, through an enormous amount of change and adjustment. And I think and expect that the whole world will suffer from, let's call it, adjustment disorder. Yeah. So you could say now, well, why is this important? I don't want to be too doomsday, but like one of my, not thought experiments, but one of my observations is I went back, and I love history because I think we can learn a lot. And things are different, but the same, like at least like so. If you go back in the time, and everybody can do that who's watching, 1850 till 1910. What the cool thing is there, because it's fairly recent, a lot of the newspapers are online. So the big ones, I think New York Times, whatever, like you can really see firsthand newspapers from that time. And the amazing thing at the time was that it's super, super, it's similar to our times in the sense that the elites of the time, like the people, the elites in Paris back then, London and Berlin, these were the three big cities, New York a little bit less, they were super excited about the world and about the technological process being made. Namely, there were three big innovations which they believed would change the world. It was the telephone, it was the car, and it was electricity. By the way, they were right. These three things changed the world as we know it completely. However, 90% of the people back then were farmers, and they were terribly afraid. So there was this huge mismatch. If you go, you see, like, by the way, the Paris World Exhibition, the Eiffel Tower, was built as a symbol for technological progress. Jules Verne, some of you might know, the famous author who said one of the books was in 80 days around the world and then flying to the moon, whatever. It's exactly what we're doing now. Elon Musk is let's fly to Mars. Jules Verne was let's fly to the moon. He had Captain Nemo, his undersea boat, again, like all of these fantastic stuff, which, by the way, all of it came true. Yeah. But 90% of the people were terribly, terribly, terribly afraid of it and were not able to adjust. And the problem is, it's one of my deep beliefs, like fear is one of the most negative emotions we have. Yeah. It really brings out the worst in us. And what did the collective fear of the time create? The collective fear of the time created National Socialism and communism. Two extremely bad, by the way, extremely wrong ideologies, but they had seemingly easy answers for the fear of the time. And then that was one of the reasons, again, the world is complicated, but like, which I believe, which created ultimately two world wars. And by the way, just after, the sad point is, just after the two world wars, the world actually became as cool and positive as the people dreamed about 100 years earlier. But it needed all of that destruction because of the fear, simplified. So, and if I want to do the negative thing, I deeply, deeply believe in all what I'm seeing, where the world is going. At the end, it's going to be amazing. Like, I think humans going to have a much, much better life with AI, robotics, and all of that. But I can equally see that if we're not managing the transition into that new world for nothing, pure fear, but unfortunately, that nothing is a lot. Yeah, I think we're going to have horrible 20, 30 years till we then realize that the fear was for nothing. So, and we can sit down now there and say, hey, we do nothing. Yeah, or we can say, what is a natural antidote to fear? What is a natural medication to help people to ease into a new sort of world? Again, helping people with adjustment. I deeply believe actually in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, there will be the number one use case for psychedelics will be helping people to cope and to get adjusted and to get sort of accustomed to a completely new world where most of the people otherwise are like, I'm out of here.
I mean, taking it back to, I guess, what you're saying, like things are moving fast, right? And I definitely agree there's going to be positives and negatives. For example, in my own life, I'm addicted to my phone. That's a bad thing. The good thing, though, is now if I have any question in the world, I go on Chat GPT and I can learn about any topic I want. It's incredible.
And you can make a cute Studio Ghibli picture.
Exactly. You could do any. It's incredible. Just the amount of information available to us. It's no one has an excuse not to be educated in whenever they want to be. Honestly. So taking it back to Ozempic, these GLP-1 agonists helpful for my understanding is diabetes and obesity, and now it's being discovered that they may be beneficial to those struggling with alcohol use disorder, and even behavioral addictions like gambling disorder. So there might be a really broad use case there. And when I think about psychedelics and let's say Atai's portfolio specifically, let's say DMT, VLS-01, buccal film DMT. In my mind, do I think that's only, and only, it's a big deal if it's only for one, but do I think it's only going to be helpful for someone with depression? No, I probably think it's going to have a good shot at being effective in anxiety and addiction. So
And maybe things like if you would have told anybody like 5 years ago, Ozempic is used, as you say, for alcohol use disorder, people would say crazy. So, and the same, so I think people can see, oh yeah, psychedelics might be used for more than just depression, whatever. But I think we're gonna see use cases we're not even dreaming. Again, take
okay.
adjustment disorder.
Yeah.
Take. By the way, another example is take again Ozempic. One of the things which why is Ozempic working? Because it's reducing your hunger, it's reducing craving, but then hopefully you also change your behavior, meaning your eating behavior, you eat healthier, whatever. So we know that psychedelics can, and not just the trippy effect, but like the neuroplasticity effect, can also aid and support behavior change. So maybe that's even a great combi therapy, that if somebody is really obese and really needs to change their life, that you're not just starting them with Ozempic, but you're kicking off the whole stuff. I think, let me say it broader, I think we're going to realize that our mind and our mental state is not just narrowly responsible for, let's call it, again, it's worse enough and big enough, narrow diseases like depression, anxiety, addiction, but that actually our mental state much more influences everything else in our body. And we're gonna, again, by the way, we have time. Again, when I come back short term, let's get them approved for these very classical diseases. But then, like Ozempic, which was first approved for diabetes, let's work on it and prove more and more. I'm not, by the way, it's also regulatory report, but I'm not advocating, oh, let's just try it. I'm like, hey, let's get it done. But I see so many more use cases. And then also it's a pure financing thing. Once we're getting things approved, hopefully our stock price is much higher or whatever, we can raise more money and then actually add more and more studies, not just to let people guess what it is, but really prove what I just said, conceptually.
Yeah. So, I really like how you brought up, first of all, prevention, like maybe it could one day be a treatment to, prevent things from getting into, let's say, a full blown depression. And then also thinking of these conditions that, for example, I read an article this morning. They did a study on psilocybin for phantom limb pain. When someone I think is missing a limb, but they still feel the physical pain from where that used to be. Who would have thought of phantom limb pain? And there's so many different things being studied right now. It's
Yeah.
remarkable.
Well, let me give you a very strong example, and I'm just not telling names because which was interesting. It's a long time ago, so maybe they're also willing. It's a good point. I'm going to contact them to revisit. As you might remember, one of the earliest studies, which especially Compass was financing, but that was not FDA studies. That was sort of now what's the English term when you just help universities to do studies. Was several end of life studies. So first of all, again, what they proven, and I remember because this was the first time when these studies came out where psychedelics were sort of in the news, that end of life depression, panic, whatever, can be horrific. It's actually, when you talk to psychologists, it's one of the worst sort of forms of panic attacks, whatever some people have, who are just not ready to die. And it's actually sad, obviously, that this is not the way you want to live that life. So, and sort of the studies which were done and which were super impressive with the outcome, showed that psychedelics, in this case psilocybin, could significantly ease sort of and help with the coping around the nearing end of life. But I talked to the doctors who did the study, and it was mostly done with cancer patients.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm very careful what I'm saying now because, as you know, studies need to be designed ex ante, so it's very tricky to take sort of conclusions which were not meant to be taken, which you didn't measure fully, whatever. Again, and the focus was all on, can psilocybin eliminate end of life
Yep.
pain, da, da, da. But like the interesting thing was that they said, when I asked them, did you see anything else in this fairly big study? They were like, yes, but we're not. It's by the way, shows you also how sometimes narrow-minded science is, because they were not daring to say it out of the, what could our colleagues say? It's not scientific. They were like, some people who were, because like the point was not that they had to be terminally ill. This was like all cancer patients in a very bad state, terminally ill. But like, again, the point was not to exactly have comparable patients. The point was all about focused on the end of life panic. But they said, interestingly, some of the patients recovered, and sort of got healed. But they were super afraid of that observation, because obviously, to say the obvious, what is not, they didn't want back then the headline, "Are magic mushrooms magic and cure cancer?" Because they don't.
Yeah, yeah.
But why did these patients recover? Because what is factual and proven is that our immune system is directly correlated to our state of mind, to our happiness or not happiness. So they were like, some patients had a super depressed immune system because they were depressive. And actually, when we cured their, so to say, depression and anxiety, the immune system did their job and they recovered. So my takeaway was that I would tell any friend who has cancer in the early days, again, do psychedelic therapy. Not, again, very important, not the name of it, not because I believe that psychedelic therapy directly has an impact on the cancer, but
Mhm.
psychedelic therapy will avoid that in the one moment in your life when you need your immune system the most, you're going to become depressive and lose it, or depressive. Yeah. So, and that for me is such an obvious thing to do, to say, hey, shouldn't any cancer patient, or by the way, any patient with a severe disease, which clearly is a drag on your mental health, we don't need to debate that, shouldn't they get ex ante mental health support? Because we all know mental health, good mental health is a good immune system, and then you need it. It's for me so obvious, again, and hopefully a use case which will be used once psychedelics are on the market.
It definitely seems like there's certainly a connection between mental health and physical health, and they can't be separated. Christian, I'd like to bring it to, back to the atai pipeline here, because again, the next 12 months, a lot of big things happening for our viewers. I think a lot of them are aware of Atai's pipeline programs, but I'll lay it out according to the recent Atai guidance. Mid-year anticipating phase 2B results from BPL-003 intranasal 5-MeO DMT for treatment-resistant depression. You got RL-007 non-psychedelic compound for CIAS, cognitive impairment associated with schizophrenia. Currently, no FDA-approved treatments for this, anticipated mid-year. And then with your internal programs, EMP01, RMDMA, social anxiety disorder, Q1, VLS01, DMT in also anticipated Q1 of 2026. I'd like to ask you, which of these readouts are you most looking forward to seeing?
Oh, that's hard. I think sort of, I mean, all are going to be important. I think the most obvious win is going to be that both 5-MeO DMT mid this year and DMT early next year, because and I know it's like with all the caveats, because we've seen it with Lycos, you can mess up execution. But I would say, I personally, let me phrase it legally correctly, but I personally very, very strongly believe DMT and 5-MeO DMT do work. Full stop. We know it. Yeah. We need to prove it properly. Yeah. So there is always an execution risk. Again, certain trials in the past have shown that you can mess up execution. But as I said, with MDMA, it's not MDMA what rejected, it was the
Mhm.
specific data set. MDMA, I would say the same, works. So that's why I'm so excited about both DMT and 5-MeO DMT, because like because I do think the execution is flawless. Like, again, my personal opinion, and flawless execution combined with a drug that works will deliver great results. So manage expectations, by the way, and I'm still optimistic. Yeah, just saying, like, we don't know that for Recognify, the schizophrenia drug. It's meaning we know a lot, so that's why we have a high sort of positive expectation, but it's not a psychedelic, so we don't have that, or
Yeah.
I don't have the conviction. But having said that, because there is literally nothing in that segment, if it does work, that's going to be a multi-billion acquisition candidate right away.
Yeah.
And then RMDA, I think, is highly likely that it works, but as it's a new version, it's not MDMA. Yeah, there's always a little bit of novelty in it. So let's see. But for me, DMT and 5-MeO DMT, they are the kind of, let's call it slam dunks.
Yeah, I am, I got to tell you, Christian, and I've told our viewers this for, I think it's probably been like 2 years now. I've written about it on Twitter. These short duration psychedelics, we always hear, of course, it's a benefit if you can get comparable efficacy to, let's say, psilocybin for, let's say, depression, and get it in that 2 hour window instead of maybe 6 to 8 hours. But, for me personally, and, maybe I'm hyping it up a bit. And of course, we still have to see more data, but I'm personally convinced that these short duration psychedelics, not only will they scale better, I think 5-MeO and NN-DMT really have potential. And of course, understanding that everyone's not going to respond the same to each psychedelic, but I think overall, I'm expecting superior efficacy over psilocybin. I've seen some data sets that have reinforced this confidence. Of course, more is needed, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that. Do you think I sound crazy for
No,
believing
no, like, by the way,
yeah,
so you should become our spokesperson, because you know that I'm always really struggling, and I should have a cheat sheet here, because like that's why I'm always calling them DMT, whatever, like as the drugs have these sort of short names, and I'm always struggling when I have them all in my head, like you know them flawlessly, which is pretty impressive. Um, look, I would say the following. So first of all, I don't think you're wrong. So I think this was a very accurate thing. I'm a little bit more nuanced in terms of, at the end, it's very patient centric.
yes.
If I look at all these psychedelics, again, that's more my personal belief combined with sort of what we see anecdotal evidence out there. And I think where the market will develop is that mental health and mental health issues are very like complex
Yes.
things, and with many root causes. Like, yeah, I always say simplified. It could be a trauma, it could be loss of connections, it could be just that you can't see the beauty in life. But I think we can sort them a little bit. So there is like maybe 4 or 5 sort of main reasons why people develop a mental health issue. But depending, I think, where sort of a mental health issue come from, and again, by the way, sometimes the doctor don't know, or the therapist, so they need to find it out with the patient. But one psychedelics might be a little bit better than the other. Yeah. And by the way, maybe sometimes you will try, and we say, like, let's try this first, like similar to other issues. Like, it's like, yeah, there are many, many diseases out there where the doctor will try one medication, and if that doesn't work, going to try another, and not giving up, because like there are nuances. And so for me, important is that we bring as many as possible and reasonable psychedelics to market, because I believe they all have the reason to exist. And then I want to give the therapist a toolbox where they then can, to the benefit of the patients, really say, look, for you that, and again, and maybe try one or two. So that is for me the important thing. Having said that, it's obviously clearly that if the 2-hour ones work, it's much better both for the patients, yeah, in terms of nuisance, yeah, for the healthcare system, for pricing, for everything. So if they're applicable, then the shorter the better. That's the very short version. Yeah, I think the best ones will be these 2-hour ones, because they fit exactly. Again, that's a very pragmatic answer than what I said before. They fit exactly into that Spravato window, which people are used to. Yeah. I think Compass, like anything around 4 hours plus, and RMDMA might also be 4 hours plus, is still fine. It's the same, but just longer. I really think, and I don't want to say anything negative about a drug we're not doing, but I really struggle to see where LSD fits there for exactly the reason. I think I always said, by the way, in way before other companies did LSD, when I was asked, I remember that, and my lawyers were like, no, don't say that. In the IPO roadshow of Atai, yeah, I always said, I love LSD in a country where it's legal. Great drug. Yeah. But where does a 12-hour trip fit? It's just like people, by the way, like legally, like nurses, like 8 hours, whatever. It's like you have two shifts, like it's so complicated. And you get the same results, more or less, with a 2 or a 4 or whatever.
Mm.
So LSD I always saw challenging just by the sheer duration. Yeah. And by the way, then you have ibogaine, which is a completely different thing because there you have to go to the hospital for 3 days. But there are existing hospitals who do that, which is all the sort of addiction clinics.
Yeah, so first of all, I remember actually seeing Atai's IPO video, and I remember seeing your face and giving the background on Atai, and you're like, yeah, LSD, like good for a 12-hour day on the beach, maybe. And I remember watching that. I thought I would touch on, so you pretty much mentioned, yeah, depression is a heterogeneous condition, right? And that's actually why, I'm a shareholder of Atai. I love the portfolio. You have two assets for treatment resistant depression because, and with different pharmacology and what works for one person might not for the other. But yeah, these I am really looking forward to these readouts. Really excited, and also it has been spoken about too much because I know, well, it has, but the focus is a lot on the short duration. But RMDMA for social anxiety disorder, I was really happy to see Atai look at this. I think Srini mentioned in a podcast with us that social anxiety disorder is like what depression was thought of 10 years ago. And when I heard that, at least in my mind, was, 10 years ago, depression was a huge problem. And social anxiety disorder was as well. But unfortunately, at least I don't think, I think that that problem is going to get worse with social anxiety disorder, just my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
again, and I 100% agree, and I very much believe it's the world we live in which makes it worse, and the whole change which I said. And by the way, one more point, like is like, and I would hope, like, obviously, again, as the father, you're always proud of your own children the most. Like, yeah, but like, we really put a lot of thoughts into our pipeline.
yeah.
And again, we had to, unfortunately, because like markets are tough and we couldn't keep our Compass stake because we got diluted. Yeah, but like, I still love it, by the way, if anybody asks. Like, yeah. So, but like, if I include Compass in that and psilocybin, we really had a good reason why our portfolio looks like it looks like. And again, why we didn't do LSD, because I didn't see the commercial viability. And by the way, that's also the reason, if you go back to our IPO video, why we didn't originally have 5-MeO DMT.
Mm,
Because I've seen far too many people who have inhaled 5-MeO DMT
mm,
and
mm,
actually had PTSD after, because it's such a rapid onset. Yeah. And till we then met Beckley, yeah,
yeah.
who have a much gentler intranasal version of 5-MeO DMT. So it's not just that we also wanted 5-MeO DMT, and now there are two companies out there doing it. I deeply believe the intranasal route, and in this case, the route of administration is the difference, is the much better one. And I wouldn't dare, actually, it's the only psychedelic I haven't tried is 5-MeO DMT inhaled, because I've heard way too many sort of negative stories. And it's a little bit like I wish maybe other people would say that's exactly what Christians shouldn't say, but like I think psychedelics are these one group of compounds where, again, this legal disclaimer, in a country where it's legal, which you can just go somewhere, yeah, where it's not yet where it's not forbidden or where it's legal. And sort of, I think it is important that the people who do develop psychedelics have an experience with it, because it helps you much more understand the potential and power, but also how to use them, and not maybe than when you just theoretize about it.
So, when it's really interesting, yes, there are two companies working with 5-MeO, but the way that each company is looking at the different route of administration, it seems like it's almost a different drug being studied by each group from what I'm learning. And that's really interesting. I'm excited to see the BPL-003 results.
Yeah.
Like I
And
think,
maybe, by the way, neutrally said at the end, the outcome is that both drugs have their viability. Again, the great thing is like, and hopefully I always get that across. I say psychedelics have these great sort of bases that they are widely used. We have a lot of anecdotal data. If you want, you can do it yourself in a country where it's legal. But on the other side, in order to make definitive statements and really know things, clinical studies under FDA guidance are just the gold standard. So, and again, while I would say I think if you execute flawlessly, like we know what's coming out, I think there will be nuances we're all gonna learn. Yeah. Positively. Yeah. And then maybe the outcome is like, hey, this 5-MeO inhaled is for that better and intranasal for the others. Yeah. Maybe, but like I just like my expectation is like inhaling, because I've seen it too firsthand.
No, I understand. I definitely understand. So I heard you on the Dales report the other day, and I loved the answer you gave to the question they asked, and I'd like to ask it here so our viewers can hear your response. People are always tagging me on Psychedelic Vantage on Twitter. They're like, RFK Jr., RFK Jr., like, what do you think? What do you think? And so I love the response you gave on the Dales report, and I'm with you with what you said. Yeah, what are your thoughts on RFK Jr. and what it means for the psychedelic drug development space moving forward?
But so we all know, or we like for the ones like so the whole administration or many people, including RFK Jr., have made comments which are very positive about psychedelics. RFK Jr. did that even in his hearing, which is great, by the way. So full stop, and I'm happy about sort of that kind of, let's call it endorsement. It helped with investors, whatever. Having said that, I deeply believe psychedelics should not be political. So I'm actually very close to that administration. Yeah. I know many of the people in the cabinet, and actually some of them did ask me like, oh, can we help? My answer is always like, you help by staying out of all of that. Yeah. Because there is a clear path, which is completely non-political, yeah, which is called FDA. And by the way, I also want to say it, the FDA has been nothing else than supportive. Like there was this unfortunate Lycos event where I think in a very unfair way, mistakes made in the trial were blamed on the FDA. And then they tried to rally politicians on both sides to overturn that. Yeah. And I think that's unfair because it completely ignores, it's like, look inside first and like literally what psychedelic therapy tells you, and analyze your own mistakes. So the FDA to us has been nothing else than supportive. And we just need to do our job. Yeah. And the job is to design studies in a professional gold standard way. Yeah. To execute them and to produce the results. And if the results are coming, and I personally believe they will, then these therapeutics becoming available is an automatism. I don't need it. There won't be a political decision. Let's make psychedelics. It's a completely different way to look at it. And I think it can ruin a lot if we go that route. Because like, look at cannabis, how messed up all of that is. And obviously it's not even comparable. Like, long story short, it is not a political position. I'm very much in the camp. Yeah, these are medications. Yeah, these are not recreational drugs. Yeah, I acknowledge that people, by the way, people might then say, oh, Christian is a hypocrite because like he's doing it once in a while. No, yeah, I acknowledge that people are doing it at a party. I said it multiple times. I wouldn't. Yeah, because I think they way too, if you want my personal opinion, divine and spiritual to be wasted at a party. Yeah, but also you need a therapist. And even if I'm saying, oh, I'm doing it in like a holiday in a country where it's legal, I do have somebody with me who is taking over that role. Yeah. And you might have heard me saying, because like people are like, but look at the 60s. Exactly. Look at the 60s. It messed up everything. No, seriously, the 60s were an anomaly and a mistake and not a role model to look up to, because the mistakes done in the 60s and 70s, they brought upon us that prohibition and that they were completely like illegal. Like if I look back the last 10,000 years, every single, by the way, cult that people are referring to, the shamans, even in the Amazon, it's highly regulated. You have to go to a shaman. It's not that people brew their own ayahuasca. Yeah, you have to go to a shaman. Yeah, if it's a good one, they're gonna do something like psychotherapy with you. Yeah, and then you do it under the guidance, which is so practical. I just want to bring that sort of into our modern world, which is like with a therapist, whatever. But long story short, I'm only for the medical way. Yeah, I think it's the right way. I think I'm standing sort of on the shoulders of history when I say that. Yeah, I think it's the right way for patients. Yeah, and that means we don't need any politics.
I'm definitely with you with the importance of science, not politics, driving FDA approval and ultimately clinical adoption of psychedelics, right? Like, that's, of course, very important. Listen, Christian, thank you so much for coming on the channel. I have one last question for you, and that is, in, okay, let's say 2 years, maybe you give whatever time frame you actually want, but what do you hope Ty will have accomplished in 2 years, 5 years, any time frame?
Look, like say end of next year, we're gonna be in a very possibly being a total different company. We hopefully had 4 readouts where hopefully most of them, all of them have proven to be super positive. Yeah. And on so that means end of next year, hopefully we have a company which is going into several phase 3 trials. And in 5 years from now, I do think, yeah, in 5 years from now, the first one or two atai approved therapeutics could hit the market and we should start making revenues.
I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for these readouts. Thank you once again, Christian.
Okay, thank you for having me. Happy we do it again soon.
And I will leave the Substack link, your Substack piece in the link below. Have a
That
good
would be
one.
great.